everyone. On today's podcast, we're talking with Emily Helgerson, EBB Childbirth Class Graduate, about giving birth while GBS positive, having a birth center transfer to the hospital, and using her mother as her doula. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, and I'm a nurse with my PhD and the founder of Evidence-Based Birth. Join me each week as we work together to get evidence-based information into the hands of families and professionals around the world. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. See ebbirth.com/disclaimer for more details. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, pronouns she, her, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today, I'm so excited to welcome a graduate of the EBB Childbirth Class. Before we get started with her story, I do want to let you know a content notice that we will be discussing Group B Strep, antibiotics for Group B Strep, heart decelerations, and a birth center transfer to the hospital. If there are any other detailed content warnings, we'll post them in the description or show notes that go along with this episode. And now I'm so excited to introduce our honored guest, Emily Helgerson. Emily Helgerson, pronouns she, her, is a graduate of the EBB Childbirth Class with EBB instructor Sharon Quinn. Emily has worked for Language Villages since 2005 as a counselor, credit teacher and facilitator, business manager, kitchen helper, lifeguard, and assistant dean. Emily and her family lived in Denmark for 18 months, where she worked at both the Østerbro and Copenhagen International Schools. Emily herself is the product of language immersion education since kindergarten and has taught language immersion in international baccalaureate schools since 2009. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education in Spanish with a minor in Italian from the University of Minnesota and a master's in second language teaching with a focus on immersion from McGill University. Emily taught Spanish immersion elementary school before deciding to stay home with baby Teddy after he was born in the summer of 2021. In 2023, it was announced that Emily will be the new Dean of Skovsøen, the Danish language village in northern Minnesota. Emily and her partner Brad live in Minneapolis with their toddler Teddy and their two cats, Noodles and Wendell, and today she is here to share her unique birth story. Emily, welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you found out about evidence-based birth and the EBB childbirth class?
Yeah, so when I was actually even before I was pregnant, but mostly when I was pregnant, I was just so eager for information. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts and I read a ton of books. And the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast was one of my favorites. And I heard you talk about the birth class on here. And I like the idea of an in-person class, but I was very COVID cautious. And also it worked really well for us to be online just for scheduling and things too, to make sure that we could both go to the class because it was important for me for my partner to go. So yeah, it worked out really well.
And tell me a little bit more about your experience taking the class with your partner. So you took the fully online option?
Yes. Yeah, we were fully online. So we had readings to do and videos to watch, and then we would meet in person on Zoom. And yeah, Sharon was awesome. And it was nice to have our little community and be able to talk things through, but then also be able to work at our own pace on all of the content. And it was super thorough. But I think having it having a weekly class kind of live made it so we stayed on top. I think if we had tried to do a fully self-paced class, we might not have made it all through everything in time. So yeah, we really liked it. Our favorite part, especially Brad's favorite part, was at the end, we kind of put everything together. So Sharon did a stimulated birth where she started with, okay, you're starting to feel contractions or whatever, and then kind of went through the whole thing and talked partners through, okay, what are you going to do now to help support? And are you offering water between every contraction and all of these different things? And it really helped when the time came. We felt really as prepared as you can be.
It's kind of funny to think that you can do a labor practice or rehearsal virtually over Zoom, but we did figure it out and it sounds like it was helpful.
Yeah, it was. It was funny because, it was just us and, hey, everybody go to the bathroom now. And so we actually left, everybody left their screen and went over to the bathroom and pretended to labor on the toilet for a little bit. And we actually did that in the birth. So yeah, it was fun and useful.
And was there anything in particular that you found like really useful or practical from the class, aside from the labor rehearsal, like any skills or techniques that you learned that you then were looking forward to using at the birth?
Yeah, a lot of the advocating for yourself and figuring out your own birth approach. And that was really important for us, and being able to be on the same page too, because I wasn't always able to communicate what I wanted in the time, but Brad knew exactly what I wanted. So that was really helpful, and having a breadth of knowledge to be able to take all of our decisions as they came was really good. Yeah. And then in particularly, all of the supports for the partner was really good, because we actually were able to practice, the acupressure points and counter pressure and all of those things, which was good compared to we just read about it. It was nice to be able to have kind of the practice.
So it sounds like it brought you and your partner closer together and got you both prepped, like, so that you had similar knowledge and skills. Like you said, he was almost able to like read your mind later on when you were in labor.
Yes. Yeah. Especially since I had read a lot. There was some new information for me about kind of how labor typically goes and things, but it was really helpful to have, exactly that shared foundation of knowledge.
And tell us about how your mom became your doula. Like, what led to that? Because that is really unique and incredible. And I'm thinking about that already for whenever my kids have kids.
Oh, do it. Absolutely. I've heard about doulas and how important they are. And also my mom is very important to me, and she actually is a registered nurse. So I really wanted her there. And I don't know if it had been different times if I would have had a doula and my mom, but with COVID, and they were changing expectations all the time about you can have one person, or you can have a support person and a doula, or what have you. So we thought that would be more likely that she would be able to come if she was the official doula. She agreed when I asked her, and that was before she knew, but actually both of my sisters were also pregnant at the same time. It was a big surprise, but she really got a lot of use out of that training.
And so she was also the doula then at your two sisters' births as well?
Mm-hmm.
All in the same year?
Yes. Yeah. So the two cousins, one was due 4 days before him and was born 3 days after, and the other one was 3 months later.
That's incredible. What a cool thing that that their grandma was also the doula at their birth. Yeah. Did she feel like, I know you probably can't speak for her, but did she feel like she learned a lot from the doula trainings? Like, she was already a nurse, but did she feel equipped to support you all that year?
So I did talk to her a little bit about it, and she said she might have chosen a different program, she said, than the one she did, but the readings were really helpful. And she read Ina May too, and The Birth Partner, which I also recommend. But having gone through that was really, really helpful, because it gave her a different perspective. And she really advocated for kind of trusting my body a lot in a way that I'm not sure she would have without that training.
Yeah, that makes sense to have that like more of a doula perspective rather than the more clinical nursing perspective alone.
Mm-hmm. And she did some massage and helped with, okay, let's walk, or do some of those things as well.
She could really do like all the support features. And it was your mom.
And it was my mom, yeah.
And I know not everybody has that kind of relationship where, they want their mom at their birth, but it's so cool that like you had that desire and both of you had it, and she went on and got additional training so she could really support you. What kind of birth were you planning? You finished the EBB childbirth class, you're getting towards the end of the pregnancy. Like, what were you thinking you were going to have at your birth?
From the beginning, I knew I wanted to try an unmedicated birth, and just to have that kind of that life experience and try to not have too many interventions. And then the more I read kind of reinforced that was a good way to go. And that's how I chose the birth center, which was really great and affirming of all of my choices. And my birth approach really was basically what the birth center would have done. And I just had to tell them a few extra things like, ask Brad if he wants to cut the cord. If he doesn't want to, ask Kathy, my mom, those sorts of things. But everything else was kind of baked into the way the birth center was. In class, we talked about writing birth approaches, and you can't plan birth, but it's good to have spent the time planning and make things clear. So I wrote one for, if there was a hospital transfer and if we ended up with a C-section.
You were planning a birth at a freestanding birth center, which is different than, some hospitals will call themselves birth centers. But just to be clear, we're talking about a freestanding birth center, not at a hospital. And I'm assuming there were midwives there that did the care?
Mm-hmm, yeah, midwives. And it's in an old, beautiful Minneapolis house. And it's really right across from a hospital, but it is freestanding. And it was really nice. I did my own swabs and my own weight and took my shoes off to go, walk on the carpet and stuff. It was really kind of a cozy, nice experience.
So you had your prenatal care there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what kind of options do they have, like when you're giving birth at the birth center there?
They have a lot of support. So they have a swing and they have a tub and they have full-sized bed and they have a couch and birthing stools and they have nitrous oxide. I think they have a TENS machine. I wasn't planning on using it. The scarves and just a lot of different supports.
And a little kitchen that you could use.
Oh, yeah. Yep. They had a kitchen and that was really nice too. And all of the kind of more medical-y things because they have to be ready for different circumstances, but they were all in cabinets. So it really looked like a bedroom that happened to have a big tub.
And so were you excited to use the tub? Was that part of the birth center you were looking forward to?
Yes, I was really looking forward to the tub.
Okay. So you were planning an unmedicated birth with midwives at the birth center. So let's move on to your birth story with us. Like, how did labor begin for you?
So even the night before, I feel like I knew something was coming because I revised my birth approaches and printed them again and looked at the online virtual tour of the hospital and stuff. I don't know. And went to bed early. That night, I woke up and went to the bathroom like I had been kind of doing. I felt something. I was like, that could have been my water, but it wasn't very much. And I was like, I'll try to go back to sleep because my plan, right, was to labor at home as much as possible and to try and sleep and rest and all of that. Call my mom when I felt like I needed her and then go to the birth center when I really felt like I needed it. But I was GBS positive. And so then after a minute, I was like, oh, wait, I should probably call the midwives and just see. So I got up and called and I was like, okay, I think this really is my water because there was more. And they said, yep, you should come in and get antibiotics. So then I went back in, sang happy birthday. It just came into my head. I don't know. I sang happy birthday to Brad to wake him up. And he was confused, but okay, let's get in the car. Grabbed all of our stuff. He had to look for his shoes. It was very exciting. We went, it was all dark because it was almost 4 a.m. at that point and went through a red light because, this is the time you have your free pass. And there was nobody around. Went to the back door of the birth center. So it was all surreal because, we'd always had to go through the front. And the midwife met us there and got me hooked up to the machines and, checked the baby's heart and everything was good. So, so they had to put the port in and then they did a HEP block so I could go home. You have to sit there and get the drugs for 15 minutes or so. And I was bummed about that because I really wanted, this very natural feel. But it was nice that they could cap it off and I could go home. And so we slept for 3.5 hours or so. And then every 4 hours I had to go back. So,
but that is so unique because most people who are planning a hospital birth, if they're GBS positive and their water breaks, they have premature rupture of membranes before labor starts. They have to go straight to the hospital and stay there and kind of receive the antibiotics every 4 hours. But you're saying like you went in, they gave you the dose. How long did that take to get?
The first one was a double dose. And I don't know how long we were there, maybe half an hour.
They just capped off the IV and then you went home?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we went home and rested and then went back at 8:30 for more antibiotics and to talk through things a little bit more. So, at the time that my water broke, then I had kind of this 24-hour timeline that started because of the GBS. They wanted me to be at least in active labor by the 24-hour mark.
So you didn't have to be like delivered or have your baby within 24 hours. They just wanted you in labor, kind of progressing by 24 hours.
Yeah, we're getting close, I think.
Yeah.
So then we were talking about, all of the different, and we had talked about that in birth class too, about different ways to get started. So that was good to not have to make all of those, think through everything in the moment. Like I had a good sense of what I did want to try for sure, and then what I would consider trying. So like the castor oil is the one I was on the fence about because, it could help, but there's downsides to that too. But also I really wanted to be at the birth center, so it would probably be worth it. I really hate throwing up, so I was a little hesitant. So we waited, but thought we would do it. Yeah, I went home and instead of walking, I swept. But I think that was good because it felt nice to have a clean house when we got home. Yeah, watched some happy videos and did some nipple stimulation with a breast pump. And Brad had me rest for a little bit too because he's like, it's going to be time, so just rest some. He saw me maybe moving around more than he thought was necessary, which was good, I think. And we did some spinning babies. We went back for more antibiotics, thought harder about the castor oil, did some more of all the trying things at home, and then really thought about taking the castor oil. But I called my mom and she's like, I think your body can do it. Like, just wait a little bit more. I was like, hey, but if we wait too long, then I might end up at the hospital with the castor oil in my system. And that didn't sound fun. But so we went to the wildflower garden and walked there, which was really nice to be out in nature. And I touched all the benches and a good time trying to get started. I started feeling a little crampy, but it definitely wasn't anything consistent. And then we went in for the 4:30 antibiotics. And that's when they we did the non-stress test, and I was, I'd already gotten the IV hooked up. He had a heart decelerations. So his heart rate went down for like 2 or 3 minutes, and it was longer than it should have. Like, they should have recovered, I guess, faster than that. The midwife was really great. She talked about how, it could be that he's just being a little stinker and everything is fine, but also we need to be careful. And so they only have intermittent monitoring at the birth center. So we were going to do a hospital transfer. So I was very disappointed. She used the Doppler again before we left, and that was reassuring because she could see he's fine now. So it's not emergency, but we're still going to take the precaution. So we walked actually over to the hospital since it wasn't emergent, and Brad moved the car. And the whole time walking there, I was crying, and she was reassuring me that, and everything was going to plan. That's why we chose this approach, right? We knew that it would be easy to transfer, but it still wasn't what I wanted. And of course, you're nervous about the baby's health and things. When we got there, they put on the monitors and everything, and the nurse was super nice, but she wrote her call number on the door. So they have a whiteboard on the door. And so it was like RN number and then like a 5-digit number. And I told Brad, I was like, at the birth center, we know everybody's name, and now the nurse has a number. I think I was just kind of focusing on details so that I wouldn't worry too much about the baby, but everybody was lovely, and I did also know their names. So, and on the way there, so the midwife, I was like, one thing I didn't check before when I was doing all of this preparation was, would my mom still be able to come at the hospital? And she said she didn't want to promise anything she didn't know. And then she had the hospital midwife, because they transferred me over. Usually the birth center midwife would stay, but it was a really busy day for births, so she had to go back to the birth center. So she had the hospital midwife. She's like, this is Rachel. She's your new midwife, and she has good news for you. And so she had her tell me that my mom could come, which was sweet. Little transition. Yeah, so I gave the birth preferences sheets, and my mom was able to come, and I asked her to bring hand soap. This is like a silly detail, but I didn't like the hospital soap smell. So that was nice. And I think anybody could do that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting little tidbit. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, I don't like the smell of the hospital soap or hand sanitizer either. So bringing your own seems like a good idea.
Yeah, it felt just a little bit more home-like, I guess. And I'm feeling sensitive, and it felt good to have that. So yeah, and so we walked the halls and did some lunges, and we brought the birthing bag with because I'd heard enough birth stories to know that sometimes you go in for an appointment and end up delivering, but we didn't bring the snack bag. And I had lots of snacks packed and everything. So Brad went home to get that and also pick up some dinner. Teddy was still having heart decelerations with contractions, or I wasn't really contracting at the time. I don't know. I was, but I couldn't feel it, I guess, at the time.
So you're having contractions on the monitor, but you weren't like feeling pain or discomfort from contractions.
Yeah.
Okay. So did they think, were you in labor at this point or not?
No, that's a good question.
But something was happening that they could see on the monitor. Did they have you on a wireless monitor for the baby's heart rate as well so that you could walk around?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was good. So I just had to kind of carry it around with me. I could walk in the halls. And they had told me, okay, by 9 p.m., we're going to kind of reassess and see kind of what we're thinking. And it was a little bit after that. They were feeling okay. And we had all these check-ins, right, during the process about, okay, things still aren't great, but they're okay and we're managing. And what do we want to do kind of thing. Brad got back and we ate, and I'm glad I ate a whole meal. We had Tibetan food. I thought I would want to eat during labor, and that was one of the things I'd learned that seemed like very low risk. And for me, as a person that likes to keep food in my system, I thought it would be really important, but I didn't feel like eating after that. So it was good that I got a full meal in, I think. And then my mom actually encouraged us to try to nap, which I was like, no, we got to keep going. We've got, like the timeline and everything. But actually, it was really good. We slept just for like half an hour. And I think, relaxing my body maybe helped because I woke up to like, oh, okay, this is what contractions are. And so I stayed in bed and like did the horse lips and things and breathed through them until I felt like I needed to get up.
This was out, like they hadn't given you any medication or anything to start the contractions or speed them up.
No, but I did ask when they checked me. So then they checked me, I guess that would have been around 9. I was 1 centimeter dilated and effaced and good Bishop score and stuff. And I asked them to sweep my membranes. And then, this contraction started and they ramped up really fast from there. So whether it was the rest or what, I don't know, or the...
Naps can be really helpful. It's really a good idea of your mom to suggest that because it sounds like even just listening to you relive the story that it was anxiety provoking for you, the transfer, the worry about your baby, the worry about your birth plans not being what you wanted, and just kind of feeling hypervigilant. It sounds like by laying down, falling asleep, it relaxed your body enough for the process to kind of take over. And then you woke up in labor.
Yeah.
So. It can be really helpful. It's a great tip for anybody listening who's having a baby soon to know that naps can be good.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, she read to us. It was very sweet. she read Brown Bear, and Goodnight Moon. Just cuddled up on the bed together. It was sweet. Yeah, and then so there it was counter pressure and position changes, and the antibiotics stayed on the 4-hour thing. I kind of waited to use the tub because I kind of liked having the idea of I have more tools that I haven't used yet.
Like it's a reward for when you get to a certain point too.
Yeah, but I did use the tub and I really liked that. For some reason, they didn't want me to be in there for more than an hour. I'm guessing it had to do with my membranes and the GBS, but I don't know. I tried to sail over the surges and did meditation and things before labor, which I think really helped. And then, my mom and Brad were great. And Brad kept giving me sips of water and just the physical touch. At one point, I was starting to tense up more than I had, and I felt like I was kind of starting to lose it. My mom she told me to open my eyes. She held eye contact with me, and that really was powerful. And then triggered something in my mind, like, oh, I think I read, like, if you smile, it can help. Some oxytocin and stuff. So I did that, and that was really helpful. So that's something I would recommend to people. Yeah, and just, vocalizing. And it was hard to communicate, what you want. Like, I know there was a time because I had my, they wrapped up my arm, but still it couldn't be like right under the water. So there was something with the faucet where it was, and I wanted them to use a sprayer, but they couldn't without moving me. And I could hear them talking about me. And I was like, just do it. I don't know. They were taking good care of me, but it was interesting to not, to be there, but kind of also not. And I started feeling a little bit pushy, I thought, and I was like, this is what I've heard of. Is this a thing? They told me not to, and I didn't push, but we did get out of the tub and they checked me. I was like 145 and I was 6 centimeters. I didn't want to be focused on numbers because I knew that's not good, but I kind of also wanted to at least be a 5. So I was fighting with myself about that. But we did go sit on the toilet. The nurse was really great as well to help. So, my mom, Brad, and the nurse, and they just said, wait. And you had to wait for the midwife to come back. And somewhere in there around that time, she said, baby isn't liking life right now. Like that had been happening, I guess, the decelerations and stuff, but I wasn't super aware.
She said, what? Baby isn't liking
life right now. Phrase that she definitely said, because Brad and I both remember it very clearly.
Okay. Things not to say to someone in labor.
Yeah,
okay.
She was great otherwise, but that one was like, oh.
That was a weird one.
I don't know what else she could have said, but yeah, so she said that, baby isn't liking life right now, and just made it clear, like, we're okay, but we've got to get things going if we're going to stick to kind of what you were planning. Not that I was planning, but what I was hoping for. Because he was still bouncing back between contractions, but he just needed to, make sure that he was getting the oxygen and everything between. And if we went a lot longer, she would start getting worried, I guess. Then we got to get the baby out. And I also remember she said, do you want to meet your son? And So I really kind of reflected and was like, I wanted my body, for the birth canal to be the fastest and safest way for him to get out. Of course, if we had to go C-section route, yes, but if I can make this happen fast, then that could actually even be faster, is my thought
Because
process.
you wouldn't have to prep for surgery. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. And I knew, reading Item A and stuff, that dilation can happen fast if your mind is in the right place. And, it just depends on a lot of factors. So I really did my mantras and open, out, down, and a lot of visualizing. And so 2:30, I started pushing. That part went pretty fast. And I remember they said, many birthing people at some point think I can't do this. And that often is a sign that you might be in transition. And I remember thinking, I will do this. I'm going to do this unless they end up bringing me to surgery anyway. If they're going to bring me to surgery anyway, I don't want to do this anymore. Kind of funny thought process. But yeah, so I did. And so we started pushing and did some different positions for that. I liked being on my knees and backwards facing the kind of the head of the bed. It was folded up. And that felt really good to me, but I guess it didn't work well for the baby. So we tried hands and knees and some different things. And for the end of it anyway, I guess I was on my back with my knees out, and they said it was a rower position, which didn't make sense to me. And I was supposed to relax my legs, but keep them open. And that part was a little bit confusing, but it worked, I guess. And they had me feel his head, which did not feel like a head, but it was interesting. They asked if I wanted a mirror, and I did, but it wasn't positioned right. And I was like, well, whatever. Just focus on the task at hand. It was helpful. She put fingers on and said to push towards that. And that was helpful to me. And just super positive language, really encouraging, you got this, you got this. They were so encouraging that I thought it was going to be oh, this is a really fast one. There's going to be 3 pushes and done, but not quite that fast. But yeah, so it's such an interesting and intense time, obviously. And I could feel, I was like, oh, this must be the ring of fire, but also kind of detached from as far as I could feel it. At least I didn't feel like it needed to be worried about, if I now going hopefully into having a second birth at some point, yes, it hurts, but you don't really care because you're focused on birthing. I don't know. Interesting. Just if people are nervous. Yeah. Oh, having my chin down to my chest was really helpful. I don't know. Red helped remind me of that. So I had really wanted to kind of breathe the baby down and labor down and take my time and listen to my body and all of that. But with the kind of time pressure and him not doing well, I tried to listen to myself a little bit if what I thought they were coaching me to do didn't feel quite right, but mostly I just did the coached pushing. So I did end up getting a second degree tear. I feel like maybe it might have been worse if I hadn't kind of prepared myself ahead of time, with stretches and stuff. I don't know if this is something you'd want to mention. I did do evening primrose oil. That was something we had learned about in the class, and I thought the benefits outweighed any risks. I kind of credit that also with my good bishop score at the beginning when we got there, but who knows, what affected what. Yeah, just feeling him come through the birth canal is just such a specific feeling, and you could feel all the different parts. I was like, that's noses and fingers and elbows and things. You can feel it in your body, and such a, I don't know, it was amazing. But yeah, and then he was here. They rubbed him really hard before putting him on my chest, but they put him right there, and that was good. They did do some suction, and he cried, though, really well and hard really soon, so that felt good. Just I knew he was strong, he's here. And yeah, it was just beautiful. And I remember I wrote in my journal after, and I just couldn't stop looking at him. And then I thought about it, and I was like, I had my eyes closed pretty much. I did look at him, and then my eyes, I think from pushing, were just really sore. But I felt like I was looking at him. I was just holding him, and it was just so beautiful. And yeah. My little baby. Brad said at some point, he said he looked like he's so small, but so with such little precise movements. He seemed like an animatronic doll or something.
So it almost doesn't seem quite real. You're like, how can this little baby be here?
Yeah.
I still can't get over sometimes when you have a loved one have a baby and you're like, it's actually here. There's a real live baby in front of us. It's moving and looking at us.
Yeah. It was just a bump for so long. Yeah. And we loved the bump, but wow, it's a real tiny person. So we did half an hour, maybe 40 minutes of skin to skin, which was great. And we tried He did latch for breastfeeding, which was good before they took him. They asked if they could bring him to the warmer. And I said yes, and Brad went with them, and the warmer was in the room. So I could still see them, which was really nice. I didn't realize, though, that they would put the hospital tags. There's like these big plastic bracelets on them and big tags that they scan and stuff, which is, a good safety measure. But I might have asked if they were still in the room with us, so he couldn't get mixed up with another baby yet. So I would have maybe asked if we could wait for that. But yeah, it was very, very sweet. And they gave him back, and took a while for somebody to come stitch me up. It was unpleasant. Birthing the placenta seemed really fine. Like, it was like, I was aware of it happening, but it was just like, oh, and it's soft and squishy and not a big deal. My placenta was small and the cord was off center, not all the way to the edge, which can happen sometimes, and the cord was kind of short. So we don't know if some combination of that had to do with the stress he was dealing with. And the midwife kind of gave me, I really wanted to see it. I didn't save it or anything. So she gave a really detailed tour showing me the placenta, which was really cool. He was 6 pounds even when he was born, so pretty small. I wasn't expecting that. I actually gained more weight than you're supposed to during the pregnancy, and nobody could explain why, like why the placenta was small, why he was small. So that caused some, I think, anxiety later. But he was fine, and he did have low blood glucose. So getting up to the room, like I got up and was helping pack things up, and I even would have walked, I think, to the recovery room, except that they told me I wouldn't be able to hold him unless I sat in the chair. But yeah, I think the experience was really different being at the hospital as far as, people coming in the room all the time, and my med schedule, and when they did my vitals checks and when they checked Teddy for different things were all off. I was like, you come in every 4 hours for this, and I don't know, it just didn't line up. So we were always coming in. And then, yeah, he had low blood glucose. So they gave him a gel, and then they said that we could supplement with formula or donor milk. And I said, definitely donor milk, but I felt like I needed more time to really go through, I had been prepared to advocate and to do the brain and everything during labor, but I didn't really, I don't know, I guess maybe also the emotional piece of like, my baby needs something. Of course, I'll do it because the doctors are saying, but I didn't realize it was also going to be milk too. It wasn't colostrum. So it seemed like the volume was really big. So that, I don't know. I think it was fine, but
it's complicated with blood sugar issues and the lack of clarity. It's on a spectrum, like in terms of whether or not low blood sugar is harmful, kind of depends on where it is and what the situation is. And it also sounds like, you were definitely prepared to advocate for yourself during labor, and you got, basically everything you wanted. But after birth, when you're exhausted and bewildered in a way from all of a sudden being a parent, it can be a little bit harder. I do want to say there's a really good podcast episode 262 that was with two parents, another mom also named Emily, talking about advocating for their baby who had newborn jaundice. So any parents who are listening might want to go back and listen to that, where we talk more about like how to advocate for your baby when you're in the hospital if they need medical attention, because it can get stressful. For many parents, it's their first time in the hospital. And like you said, you're prepared to speak up for yourself, but speaking up for your baby, you can feel a little bit more uncertain. And if you're okay with me explaining a little bit about the small placenta issue, is that okay?
I would love to hear it. Yeah.
So that was actually something that came up a month ago in our EBB Pro membership. We have a forum called Ask the Research Team where people ask questions. Lisa Taylor, one of our members, and she runs a podcast called Birth Matters, posted a question about how there is a campaign run by parents trying to convince obstetricians to make it standard of care to measure the placenta in pregnancy to prevent stillbirth. So it had kind of come to the attention of one of her clients who had a very small placenta. And so what I ended up doing is kind of doing a quick review. And I found that, in the past, there's been a lot of attention when you do ultrasounds to measuring the baby, but not as much attention placed on measuring the placenta. And there actually has been a lot of research showing correlation between an abnormal placental size and either newborn health outcomes that are worse or stillbirth. there hasn't been any research showing that an intervention to identify the small placenta and then doing something about it has improved outcomes. We need more research basically on whether you do additional nutrition counseling or blood pressure monitoring or more frequent ultrasounds or non-stress tests and that sort of thing. It's still kind of a newer area, if that makes sense. Like correlation doesn't equal causation, but it does make theoretical sense that if there was a placental issue, it could affect the growth of the baby or maybe your baby's ability to like tolerate labor at the very end of pregnancy. Like I said, there's no research on showing that certainly we need to be identifying and treating people with small or very large placentas, but it's something that I think we'll keep an eye on in the future to see what research comes out. If it helps, I will say my first baby had a small placenta and was in the 6-pound range as well. My next 2 babies both had normal sized placentas and they were both 9 pounds, 2 ounces when they were born. So I do think that there can be correlation between the size of the placenta and the size of the baby. And the research does show that abnormal placental growth can affect the baby's growth. I don't know if there was necessarily anything abnormal with my baby or their placenta, but who knows? Like at the time, there wasn't research on it, and I don't know if there's enough at this point. And obviously, that was just like what we call an N of one, just one anecdote. But I think it's interesting, and I definitely want to keep my eye on that research.
Yeah, I remember I asked the midwife later too, and then also at follow-up appointment that it could have been just kind of an accident of implantation that caused that. I also had my placenta was in the front. Yeah, it was all good, and he did great. We had to do the triple feeding because of the supplementation. So we were attaching him to the breast, giving him bottle, and I pumped. And so that was a lot in the first few weeks. We did that for 4 weeks, I think. No, it was probably like 2.5 weeks, but it felt like forever because it's a lot. There's a lot that goes on. Yeah, postpartum was really, I had a lot of support, which I think is really important and wonderful. And it was still really, really hard. So I feel for anybody that doesn't have as much support because my family was able to help and Brad was great and healthy baby and everything. So I do think I had some anxiety that maybe could have been diagnosed if it was not terrible, but also it was maybe excessive. So that was a bummer. But other than that, I had a good experience postpartum.
And did you then continue to get postpartum care through the birth center after you were discharged?
Yeah, it was really nice. I was able to, so I did a 2-week appointment with the hospital midwives because they'd like to do a 2-week one. And then I think it ended up being more like 8 weeks, but follow up at the birth center with my original midwife. So I was able to talk things through with both of them, which I think was really helpful for my processing and as well as just having more care because we know that's kind of a lack in our system.
It sounds though like, although I know the transfer is stress inducing, you were prepared for it. You had like a birth plan in case you were transferred that you'd made in the class. For the most part, it sounds like they were supportive of your wishes to try and keep interventions to a minimum. Does that sound like a correct assessment?
Yep, they were really great. They knew my preferences, and I don't know how much my mom and Brad had to advocate, but I don't think so. I think they were really they were really good about asking before doing anything, and they did a really nice job. When we went to some of the antibiotic appointments, we drove past the hospital and I was like, okay, we could end up there. I was trying to always keep an open mind because I knew you can't plan anything. But I felt really respected the whole time, and that really helped everything too.
Do you have any advice for people listening who are planning on entering birth or parenthood soon?
Yes, definitely do a birth class. Visualizations and meditation really helped me. Make sure everybody stays hydrated, not just yourself. Include this for Brad. He always was giving me water or body armor, and then he would sip some himself. The nurse at the end, like after I had delivered and had rested a little bit, she said, okay, it's time to go. We have to go to the bathroom. Oh yeah, they time when you have to go to the bathroom. So then that was also in the schedule and coming in all the time. Anyway, but she said, we're going to go to the bathroom. You might not actually pee because you did pee some on the table, like on the Chuck's pad or whatever. And I was like, I've got to go. And she's like, okay. And I overflowed their little bucket. They keep track, I guess. And so, yeah, Brad takes that as a badge of honor. But my mom didn't drink enough water, and she was really focused on me. So that's something I would tell anybody that's coming, to make sure that everybody's taking care of themselves as well as the birthing person. I forgot to use my essential oils that I brought, but actually my sister, I had given her some lavender from my garden, and she said that was really helpful. Yeah, there's lots of books that I recommend. The Birth Partner for sure, and then some that have been recommended a million times. The Mayo Clinic guide I thought was really helpful. And then if you don't want to read, and then they have one, this is something I didn't know, they have one also for your baby's first years, which I wish I'd gotten that before, because I knew a lot of people say I prepared so much for the birth, but not really for having a baby. And so I had read and listened to a lot about parenthood, but I didn't really get a lot about the first couple weeks of baby's life. Like I knew more about tantrums than I did about feeding schedules. So this one was really good. And then if you are somebody that doesn't like to read a million books, this is one that was kind of fun. The Pregnancy Day by Day ended up with a lot of the same information as a lot of the bigger books, not bigger, differently organized books, but it's just 1 page a day. And so it's a lot of pictures, and you just get kind of little morsels of information at a time. And then you could kind of see like, oh my gosh, there's not that much of the book left. You read 1 page a day. And then I really liked doing prenatal yoga, and I did the Bluma's DVD because I wasn't going in person. But she's local, but she also does the spinning babies, which we also found useful. So yeah, that was really good.
Sounds like you had a lot of resources. And speaking of day by day, I know my friend Jen McClellan at Plus Size Birth or plusmommy.com has a new week by week educational email series you can sign up for free, which I'm not pregnant, but I signed up for anyways because I just wanted to do it. And I just finished going through the whole 40 weeks and it was really helpful. So love those kinds of resources. And Emily, you recently opened an Instagram account called Common Ground Parenting. Can you share with our listeners why you created this and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I feel like there's so much information about pregnancy, and obviously you are a big part of that. But the information about parenthood is so nuanced, and people have such different perspectives on so many issues. And I found it hard to kind of weigh through what was valuable, what was real, what was based on more than opinion. And if there's two camps about something, I didn't even know that there was an alternative to basically the sleep training camp of things for sleep, for example. But then I found out, there's two of different ideas, and they're very different, and they have very strong opinions. What is the truth? What actually is worthwhile there? What can you do and feel good about, kind of thing? And so I said common ground, because there's these two camps, but the common ground is everybody wants a healthy, happy baby and a good bond and everything. So when should you listen to who, and how can you kind of trust yourself as well as a parent? And I haven't made any posts yet, but I think it's really important and something that could be really useful for people on many different topics. So
yeah, and the concept in general is just so important that we can all find what we have in common, and sometimes it doesn't have to be either or. Like white culture in particular is very binary focused and good or evil, whatever. Like there's two sides and only one side is right, my side. But like you said, you can pull different things from different strategies to come up with your own unique path to parenting. So that's really cool that as you're parenting, hopefully you'll be helping other parents. And I know you have really exciting ventures this summer with the language camps. And we just really thank you, Emily, for coming on this show and sharing your story about, premature rupture of membranes, Group B Strep, birth center transfer. None of that is easy, and you made it through. And I think it's really inspiring that you were able to navigate all those challenges with grace. And we're thankful that you shared your story with us.
Yeah, thank you. It was an amazing experience. And yeah, just so happy and proud to be a mom.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as we talked with Emily about giving birth with PROM and GBS and having a birth center transfer, and also using her mom as a doula. Hopefully, we'll see more grandmas and aunts and those kind of people also taking on that role, which is really a traditional part of birth going back as far as we know. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye. This podcast episode was brought to you by the Evidence-Based Birth Childbirth Class. This is Rebecca speaking. When I walked into the hospital to have my first baby, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Since then, I've met countless parents who felt that they too were unprepared for the birth process and navigating the healthcare system. The next time I had a baby, I learned that in order to have the most empowering birth possible, I needed to learn the evidence on childbirth practices. We are now offering the evidence-based birth childbirth class totally online. In your class, you will work with an instructor who will skillfully mentor you and your partner in evidence-based care, comfort measures, and advocacy, so that you can both embrace your birth and parenting experiences with courage and confidence. Get empowered with an interactive online childbirth class you and your partner will love. Visit evidencebased birth.com/childbirth class to find your class now.